Thanks, everybody, for your time today. My name is Stan Ross. I'm the CEO of IFNY. I'm actually one of the founders. The company was started back in December of '91. The story, though, that you're going to hear, though, is going to be one that is going to be quite new to you all. The company had a lot of success, and I stepped down as its CEO in June of '05, and then was brought back in December of '06. We actually went through some tough times and even had to take the company dark, but we now are up and actively trading on the bulletin board. We do all our SEC filings, and so we have it going again. But this is the only second presentation I've probably done in the last 5 years. I did one last month, which was the first time. So the story will be new to you, but I think it'll be quite exciting as well. As you know, we still always have our forward-looking statement. This is a quick overview of the company. We have approximately a little over 20 million shares outstanding. Our market cap is right around 45 million. The stock trades right now in a range between $2 and $2.25. We do have a very large oil and gas concession, the 1.4 million acres, with initial studies indicating as much as 10 billion barrels of recoverable oil in place. And I'll elaborate a lot more on that. We're right now in the final stages of our environmental impact study, and then we'll move into shooting seismic, and then also going ahead and looking at partnering up with an industry partner. So here's the main prospect here. While we had some domestic production, the majority of that's all been sold off. I wouldn't hang my hat on any of it to try to make or break this company. It's all riding on this play right here. Now, that's a lot of risk-reward, but when you see the reward, you may have to evaluate it for your portfolio. Again, we've done 2D seismic. We've looked at it. We've spent actually probably pushing close to $4 million now. The environmental impact study we anticipate being done here in the next 30 days. It has already identified from the seismic we acquired and reprocessed 4 very large structures. This is, again, a large concession. It's about 120 miles long by about 20 miles wide. Depending on how you're discounting the findings, it's as high as 10 billion plus, or even discount the heck out of it to get it down to 1.5 million barrels. The neat thing about this region, too, is that very limited information is available. They just have not drilled any wells down into the Cretaceous Formation, which is where some of the much larger finds have been over the last several decades. And we will talk on that here a little bit, as Noble Energy has shot 3D seismic and does have the Cretaceous in their findings. We've got a great management team. Renato Bertani was one of the leads on this project. Renato had over 33 years with Petrobras. 6 of those years, he was actually the president of Petrobras America, handling all their U.S. operations. He's very strong geology, geoscience background. He also was the vice president of the World Petroleum Council. He's also head of their technology programs as well. Luciano is a gentleman who was recommended and introduced to me through Renato. He, too, has a Petrobras background and was one of the scientists that we put on the project when they were doing the evaluation of the 2D seismic that we had. Jeff Roberts, I met Jeff Roberts early on when I started going down to Nicaragua, which my very first trip down there was in December of '99. Jeff came on early into the game and got real excited about it, and I have to give him all the credit in regards to actually identifying the structures and assisting us in getting the blocks that we were able to get and win through the Nicaraguan government. His background is with Amoco, Sun, Oryx. He handled all the Gulf of Mexico production. He's done stuff, throughout the world as well. So he's very knowledgeable in offshore exploration of very large structures. So we basically have a very large play. It's quite large in comparison to the concessions that you can get awarded here in the States and the Gulf of Mexico. Limited amount of information there because they only have drilled about 26 wells, although they did have some fairly good success in those wells, a lot of them being very shallow. Again, the big region as far as the productivity in the Cretaceous has never been explored. So here we're breaking it down a little bit. You have 2 blocks. When we went out to get the awards, you were only allowed to Wind, I believe it was somewhere around 400 or 400,000 hectares. So, but you could bid on as many blocks as you want, and we did bid on the two that we liked, and were successful in our bids. We had maybe less than 10% of our area overlap with what Noble has, so they did win those blocks over ours based upon the economics, and I'll walk you through those. So here's where we're at. Offshore Nicaragua. Many years ago, everyone would just stay away from there, but you know the environment down there has changed dramatically. So many of them have gotten rid of the guns and picked up briefcases. I think they have over 20% increase in regards to tourism down there. You've got every major hotel down there. You've got golf courses being built and designed by Nicholas and others. It's a very beautiful country that's probably, I don't know, maybe compare it. I haven't been to Costa Rica that often, but maybe to what Costa Rica was 30, 40 years ago. But there's a lot of money going in down there. We haven't had any problems with the government. I actually have been a very pro-Nicaraguan mouthpiece because I have seen the growth down there and feel that it is a good opportunity. Okay, so here we're breaking it down. The requirements on us were mainly a work commitment that we had to agree to win our blocks. You had to agree to drill wells, you had to agree to money up front, you had to agree to royalties, things along those lines. And we were pretty creative and also wanted to make sure that we put together something that we could live up to when we won our concessions. So they're broken down basically into two different areas. The Tyra block has us doing limited amount of environmental work, limited amount of 2D seismic, which we were able to acquire, do not have to go out and shoot. We did reprocess some of it. So we've done both on the Tyra, and you'll see here on the Perlis blocks, we've already actually done all the necessary work in our subperiod 1, which runs out for about 2 years. The unique thing about our project is the time clock does not start in regards to the expiration period on ours until we have received our environmental impact study. So as I've been involved in projects in the States, there may be a change at the top and someone wants you to study for a different environment that's running around. So it can delay and you getting your permits. Well, that's the reason we made sure that none of this, our time clock didn't start until we got our permits. And so far, that's worked out real well, although we were able to go ahead and do the minimal amount of work and get credit for it. Here's the, sort of the financial commitments. As you can see, our area fees are, equate to less than $50,000 a year. I mean, it's just nothing as far as your rentals are concerned. The training program at $50,000 a year per block is very minimal, very easy to handle. The unique thing about our deal is the royalties. We only have to pay the government a 5% royalty until we receive 1.5 times our money back on the project. Okay, and the project's going to be costly, expensive, and if there's oil there, you're looking at billions of dollars being eventually, spent, which would mean that if we are able to bring in a partner at maybe an 80 NRI, you can see we got 5% going to the government, and we're taking the 15 off the top. Then it only goes up to 10, and after we get another 1.5 times our money back, it maxes out at 15. Corporate taxes at 30, that's in our contract as well. That is their current law as well. The net profits, that'd be fantastic, but as a lot of you know how energy companies go about doing their accounting with depletion and depreciation. That'll be a while before that number really kicks in. If it kicks in early, then that just means great. So I mentioned there's very little data. You've got the well control as far as 26 wells that have been drilled. Most of them were shallow. 10 of them had decent oil and gas shows. Matter of fact, the Perlis 1 was producing at 350 barrels a day. These wells, you have to realize, were drilled back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I think the last well was drilled in like 1978 down there. So there's not a lot of new science, not a lot of new technology that was able to really go down there and explore these hydrocarbon formations. The seismic data that we have and others that you could acquire from Frugro. Frugro is one of the largest seismic companies in the world. There was 2D data that was down there. They shot additional 2D data. They reprocessed the original 2D data. And so we were able to acquire all that. But again, you're seeing just the Miocene and the Eocene formations. and you could not see the Cretaceous at the time, which is, again, the target zone that you eventually will want to go to. So all these beautiful lines here are the different seismic that was shot through the area. This will be important because we'll show you an analog in regards to some very successful fields that have seismic data and the correlation that it has with some of the data that we have here. All right, so here's the neat thing about it, and this is the thing that really surprised the guys from Brazil. And you have to understand, we gave them the data. This isn't a situation where we had Jeff Roberts looking over a group of guys' shoulders and saying, now look at this structure, or look at that, the size of that. Our data was gathered from Frugro. We had already had our thoughts on it, and we gave this raw data to Luciano and Renato. They took it back to Brazil, showed back up about 90 days later with their initial thoughts, and then a couple more months came back with what they believed the real findings were. They were amazed how Jeff was able to identify the blocks to where this structure, which is the Nica-Tinkham Ridge, this thing goes well in excess of the length of our play, but it has all the tectonic features that you would want if you're doing some exploratory drilling as far as oil and gas. I have a lot of additional technical data I could present at any time, but this is the key. I mean, as you can tell, we are right on that structure. It goes through our property. Noble has the property there to the east of us. There's 4 very large structures. Any one of these structures alone can attain over 1 billion barrels. We plan to, while we only have a 3-well drilling requirement, we definitely will be drilling all 4 structures and probably doing multiple wells in those structures. But we sat there and we looked at it, and again, not trying to get overly aggressive on our numbers to come up with our numbers. Again, you're still looking at only, roughly 100 foot of pay. We're looking at porosity of 20%. Some of this data was there that we could find from existing wells that were drilled. So oil saturation of only 65% and a recovery factor of only use of 35%. So any of these can vary one way or the other and would change the numbers, but you get a number slightly discounted that comes over 10 billion. At a PV50, it's like 4.6 billion barrels, and then discount it pretty heavily by 90%. You're still at 1.5 billion. And this is, again, and I emphasize, the shallower structures, formations that we've seen. Not in my presentation is data from Frugro and where they actually were trying to help the Nicaraguan government back in the 90s. They put together a presentation and were showing it to different industry partners of what their beliefs were. And they, too, were coming up with scenarios that were very similar to ours and multi-billion barrel potential. So here's the blocks. And, again, they're broken out as far as the structures. Luciano and those guys, the Brazilians, named them all after fish for some reason. But that gives you a little indication of the size of each of the structures and if you discounted them back. Okay, so now what you want to do is just sit there and say, okay, well, the science and what we're seeing right now looks pretty promising. What else, in the region would sit there and say, there's help you out in your science. But you have to go back, and look at the reconstruction of the tectonic plates and realize that at some point in time, all of this was real close to each other, not like it is now, since the plates have shifted quite a bit, and Africa's taken off, South America, and as you all know, we have today's world. But you'll see on there that we've identified where the Cretaceous carbonates actually outcrop, and then also where the Nicaraguan Caribbean shelf is, where our play's at. So if you look at the analogs, the one that I talk about the most is the La Paz field, because we have some information on it, and there's some seismic data that is very similar. But there's numerous plays throughout this region, especially when you do the tectonic reconstruction of billion-barrel fields. The La Paz field at Lake Maracaibo, we've used quite a bit because of the fact that here you've got the data, and it's already got a proven history of being able to produce almost 1 billion barrels already. But I like this too. This is the size of our concession in comparison to the La Paz field. So if anyone sitting there doesn't believe that maybe 10 billion barrels can be possible in a concession, you have to realize how large our concession is. I mean, it is quite large in comparison to La Paz. So here's a little bit of information on it. They basically started drilling these wells back in 1944. Very shallow, the first well came on at about 1,000 barrels a day. They had a well there, the P84 peaked at 30,000 barrels a day, and the field itself peaked at 160,000 barrels a day back in the 50s. Again, as we know, not a lot of science was available, horizontal drilling, other applications were just not around there, and you still had this kind of production. Again, this data is a little bit old as I show you those numbers from 92, and they've since surpassed the billion barrels. So here's the thing that's interesting to me and to Jeff Roberts and the rest of them. The La Paz field has a cross-section of seismic that looks very much like this. Here is the 2D seismic that we have, and you can see, I think, if we get this to work right, right there is the Nica-Tinkham Ridge right there that we're talking about, and the similarity of the two ridges and the drop-off. A lot of wrench faulting, a lot of structure that's going on through there. Again, we talk about the Cretaceous because that is where your real home run comes, if you can get there. It actually outcrops in the northern Nicaragua, Honduras, onshore. So it's present. It's present there. If it's present there and it's present down here in the La Paz field, there's strong likelihood it's going to be present in that region. Until just less than a year ago, when Noble shot their 3D seismic, there was no evidence that it was there. Now, again, there wasn't no evidence that it was gone, but Noble has shot their 3D seismic, and it is evident on theirs that it's there. So when Noble starts drilling here in a few months, if they drill down to the Cretaceous and they hit, and that source rock is productive, the likelihood of it being productive on our play is very high. So I'm talking about this in regards to, here's a small company, Infinity. We had a lot of domestic small plays. We did fairly well. We had an oil field service company. We did fairly well. We got involved in the Barnett Shale on some of the outer tiers, and it bit us hard to where we had to regroup. But we never gave up on the Nicaragua play. I personally stayed on as the company's chairman for one reason, and it was this play, because I believe in it that strongly, and I know the potential this has for a company like ours. It's very workable. Right now what we're doing is, as I mentioned, we're just finishing up our environmental impact study, which will let us move straight into shooting our own 3D seismic, which we look to, just more clarify the existing structures that we've seen. We'll also be able to be looking for the Cretaceous, which would be nice to be seen. We also are already in talks. We've had numerous talks with industry partners. Some of the biggest companies in the world, I'm not just talking domestic, in the world have contacted us. One other company, I can throw out their name because it is public, but Repsol. They're owned by Spain, the Spanish-owned energy company. They are down there and starting to explore for it. So it's not just little Infinity out there doing some wildcatting. Noble opened up their data room as they are bringing in a partner because they do have a large play that they want to do something with. And to me, it was interesting. Noble just had their call last Tuesday. And Noble originally sat there and talked about opening up their data room, and their CEO stated when they opened it up, and I'll quote him, "We got a big surprise from the amount of industry interest in this area." I'm getting the overflow from that. We are able to take things a little slower, but we are reaping the benefits from Noble and what they're doing. So you can sort of see our 3-year game plan. We don't have any real heavy requirements on any drilling, but this is the game plan, not requirements. So again, that's my side of it, my take on it, but here's a little bit more. This is a slide from Noble that they had from a couple of their presentations. December, I think they did their big meeting in Houston where they invited all the analysts. It's about a half-day deal where they talked about not only their existing properties, but their exploratories. And as you can see here, that here's some things that they consider game changers. Well, originally, they had Nicaragua down there at 1.3 billion barrels, and this slide shows 1.7. Tuesday, they did their presentation. Now it's up to 2.7 billion barrels of gross reserves they believe they're setting on. They are planning on doing their drilling. Here, he stated in his call on the second quarter, the exploration manager said that they were going to try to do it in the second quarter. I'm sorry, Chuck said the third quarter. So sometime second, third quarter, they're going to get started on their drilling, and that will have definitely continue to draw interest towards us, whether or not we have a partner or whether or not we want to sit on our hands and roll the dice to see if they have some success, then we'd be a lot more expensive. So that's some information on Noble and their perspective, and as I mentioned, Frugro had some similar comments. But what does it mean in valuation? I mean, everybody's in this about valuation. Tell me I'm getting in cheap and I got a chance to make some real money. So, we got original numbers out there as high as 10 billion, but that's the high side. So let's just beat it up. Let's go below even the P90 and use a billion barrels. Let's sit there and look at the fact that, Little Infinity doesn't have a lot of capital, doesn't have a big staff, might not be able to, might get strong-armed by the big boys, and we have to give away 90% of this play because we just are too small. So now we're down to roughly 100 million net to us. And if you only use $12 in the ground value for that, that puts it at $1.2 billion in value. We then we only have 25 million shares outstanding. I mean, we're not one of those 300 million shares outstanding and having to hit home runs to show some real value here. But at 25 million outstanding, that's $48 a share. I mean, so you can almost sit there and say, okay, hey, a 1% probability this thing could be worth $48 a share. I always sit there, though, and I say, well, what if I'm wrong? What happens instead of using $12? What if I should have used 18? Well, then that puts us at $72 a share. Well, what also if instead of a billion barrels, let's say it was 2 billion? Okay, now I'm at 144. Well, what if I get to keep 20% of this? Now I'm at $288 a share. So I know it's happy hour out there. I haven't been in there yet, but it's one of those things that I had a fund manager got involved in the company, and he said, I tell those that get involved in this company is either worth $40 to $400 a share, or it's worth zero. But those are the odds I'm willing to take on something like this. Noble Energy has had a great run of success. They wouldn't be down there looking at spending somewhere close to $300 million over the next 3 years is what, again, this is all on their website, is what they're talking about if they did not believe that there was some real probability. And that's their net number because they're looking to bring in some other players with them. So there could be $750 million thrown at this in the next 3 years. We're very fortunate to be where we're at. I'd like to have been sitting with a few $1 million extra in the bank, but at the same time, I have a situation where I'm not under the gun to have to do a whole lot. We have talks going on with well over a half a dozen industry partners about partnering up. I have been approached by financial partners about partnering up. They would like to come in, shoot the seismic for us, give us some money, shoot the seismic, which will enhance our marketability for bringing in another partner. So we've got a lot of options. As I mentioned, this is only the second roadshow that I've done as far as reinventing and retelling the Infinity story, but I will be doing a lot more of them, and that's what we're trying to do is get the exposure and tell the story out there. I'll go ahead and open up the floor for Q&A if anyone would have any questions. Yes. Noble was the very first ones to sign the NDA to get into looking at our play. Now, they have a large concession. They're originally were around 2 million acres, and they're about 1.8 now. There's some relinquishments that they have to do. Eventually, they'll be down to about 1.42. But their take on it was also that this thing is so big that if we're going to really get it into developing it, we want to go ahead and bring in a partner. So they're already looking for a partner. They didn't feel like they wanted to go ahead and add to the situation. Yes. Okay, political risk. I have to say that I've just not had any issues. I've been down there where I've had problems with some of the autonomous regions, some of the smaller regional governments, and I've been able to go to Pro-Nicaragua, which is an arm of theirs that assists companies down there, and they help with the clarification. But I've met with President Ortega, been to his house, and I stay very close contact with the U.S. Embassy, so I haven't had any discussions with the groups. Are literally from getting calls out of the clear blue from companies I had not approached before, which happened as recently as last week because of the overflow of Nobles people, to some of them that have asked for terms from me. And what I've done is I've said, well, here is the range. There's 4 variables I'm looking for. I mean, obviously, I'd like to see some money come into the company to buy into the play. I'd obviously like to be carried through the exploration phase of it for some portion. I'd like to deliver roughly an 80 NRI, and then I'd like to be carried through the development phase, some portion, with the right to participate in a bigger portion if I choose to pay to play. So you have basically 4 moving parts there. Comments have been that, it looks like you could possibly, get some combination of this. Some areas are saying, you may be dreaming a little bit, if you think you're going to get that much. But it's a give and take, and so we're at discussions with some of them already. Right now we're looking at around 12 million is what we think that we're going to be able to do. Now, we're in shallow water, too. I'm sorry. I should have pointed that out. Our water depths are anywhere from 30 feet to 300 feet, so we'll be using, more of a conventional jack-up rig. The shelf there that you can see, Noble's probably 300 feet to 3,000 feet, as far as their play. Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm knowing. We bought an oil field service company. You're referring to maybe some of the Texas properties? I have to double check your numbers. There's one that we had an oil field service company we bought for $5 million. And then when I had to step back into the company to help pay down the debt and everything else, we were able to sell it. We ended up selling it for $52 million. So we got a real good return on our money, and that was over about an 11-year period of time. The most recent assets we've had small plays in the Rockies and a few in the here in Texas. We no longer have the Texas properties. We have just a few leases. We no longer have any of the Rocky Mountain. We have very few there. Debt-wise, we have minimal debt. We do have some payables out there. Most of the payables are associated with the subsidiaries in Infinity Oil and Gas of Texas and or of Wyoming or the Rockies. So I'll try to nail it down on 4.8. I apologize. I don't have that. I'll try to find that out and get a card from you. Yeah, I mean, it is a concern. I mean, right now, because, when you went dark, unless you knew the story, you weren't, no one was getting involved. And with all the problems, you weren't getting a lot of brokers and big funds involved either, and some of them can't because of the rules. So, I think right now maybe over half of the voting shares are, somewhat in friendly hands, but they're friendly until the stock gets to about $5, $6, and then that changes their interest. Yeah, I'm very concerned about it. I think there's some real valuation here, and I'd like to possibly propose, maybe at some point even a poison pill, because, again, it's either worth, I tend to agree with this, it's either worth 40 to 400 or it's worth 0. So I don't want to get bought out I'd prefer not to get bought out at 10 or 12 when, especially when we're so close. I mean, they are going to start drilling, in just a matter of months. So a lot of data is going to come up. So I see my time's up. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.